AskReddit by Fuzzercuffs. Who was vilified in their time but in hindsight was completely right? Dr. Claire Cameron Patterson not only discovered the true age of the earth with his research in lead dating, but during this process he accidentally discovered the dangers of lead contamination. Then he went, wait, we're putting this shit in gasoline, cans, paint, etc. He then began campaigning against lead in everyday products. In particular, he targeted the gasoline industry. You can imagine how that went in the courtroom. He was vilified, excluded, and slandered against, but kept pushing for lead to be removed from gasoline. Took decades, but obviously lead was removed from gasoline almost entirely by 1990. Humanity keeps rediscovering how badly these Romans knew it was bad, but people still decided it couldn't be that bad and put it in everything. Nan Britain. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/nan_Britain had an affair with President Warren G. Harding in the early 1920s. Harding died of a heart attack in 1923, and Britain tried to sue for child support. She was ridiculed in court. In 2015, Ancestry.com did a DNA analysis on Harding's and Britain's descendants. Nan was telling the truth. The same thing happened to the children of Thomas Jefferson's slave mistress. To this day there are Jefferson descendants who refuse to recognize them, despite DNA evidence. They were also the only slaves that Jefferson ever dated. Claire Patterson. In addition to being an accomplished scientist, he was attacked for decades due to his controversial view that lead in gasoline was harmful. He was eventually vindicated, and his contributions to removing lead from gasoline may place him among the most important people for human health in modern times. The Bill Nye reboot had a great segment on him. Keep in mind, this guy wasn't vilified because they thought he was wrong. He was vilified because oil companies knew that he was right but did not want to own up to the fact that they were poisoning the air and people, because that meant that they would have to lose money. They seriously would have rather destroy society than lose money. Thank God things are different now. Lindy Chamberlain. The dingo killed my baby lady. She was vilified, mocked and ridiculed across the world. She then spent 3 years in prison, before it turned out she was actually telling the truth the whole time, and a dingo did, in fact, kill her baby. Local Aboriginal people literally told authorities that the dingoes in the area were known to attack young kids. And an experienced Aboriginal tracker had found tracks indicating that a dingo in the area had been dragging an unusually heavy object. All that, and people still vilified her. Joseph Lister. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Joseph_Lister . One of the first doctors to publicly endorse germ theory and recommend disinfection. At the time, surgeons would literally move from an amputation to an autopsy to the delivery room using the same tools, often without even cleaning the gore from their hands and clothes. When Lister recommended comprehensive disinfection between procedures, nearly the whole British medical community laughed at him. He spent years as a pariah gathering data from his own practice until he could finally prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that his methods reduced post-op infection by a staggering rate. Now he's known as the father of modern surgery. At least he had the famous mouthwash named after him, I presume. Johnny Lighton, when he said on the radio that Jimmy Savile was dodgy. I heard this too. Given it a quick Google, seemingly he said, I want to kill Jimmy Savile, he's a hypocrite. I bet he's into all kinds of seediness that we all know about but aren't allowed to talk about. I know some rumors. The interview wasn't aired at the time, and he was banned from the BBC. Probably more alarming is he was already alienated, ostracized by a lot of the BBC by that point. Pushed out, so if Johnny was still hearing rumors, Savile's activities must have been well known all over the BBC. Sickening how many people must have stayed silent. The guy who came up with the theory of Pangea and continental drift. Alfred Wegener. Not only that, we now have theories that Pangaea was only one of the many supercontinents that have existed throughout the eons. Nuna, Rodinia, Pannotia. Edit, misspelled Nuna. Richard Jewell was blasted as being the Atlanta Olympic bomber when he was really just a guy helping people out down there. He deserved better. Poor guy died young too. He was only 44 years old. Natural causes. Barry Marshall, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Barry_Marshall and also Robin Warren, his co-researcher. Forever, the cause of peptic ulcers was believed to be stress, spicy food and too much acid production. They believed it was actually of bacterial origin. No one believed them. They were ridiculed because the belief was that bacteria couldn't survive in the acidic environment of the stomach. Not until Barry took a cocktail of H. pylori bacteria, which caused him to have massive inflammation of the stomach, which was found to be colonized with the bacteria, but a course of antibiotics later and it was gone. One Nobel Prize later and now the treatment of peptic ulcers is turned on its head, and instead of months or years of discomfort it can often be sorted with a week or two course of antibiotics. Edit, Marshall not Marshall. I used to really worry about getting an ulcer from all the stress I was under. One of the things that stressed me out was the prospect of getting an ulcer from all the stress I was under. The man with learning difficulties, sadly accused of being the cause of the Great Fire of London, said he never did it, but after his execution proven he wasn't even in the country at the time. Robert Hubert. www.thegguardian.com/science/2014/may/25/stanley-prusiner-neurologist-white-skepticism-away. Stanley Prusiner. Everyone who was anyone in science knew that proteins couldn't be an infectious agent. They weren't even alive. He suffered so much mockery and skepticism, until the mad cow disease, and Kuru etc. were found to be precisely what he had described. Ignaz Semmelweis, https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ignaz_Semmelweis (the world didn't know about germs yet, but he saw that way less women were dying from childbirth when midwives attended the births than when doctors did. Doctors were coming from autopsies and wrecking women's shit. Ignaz suggested they start washing their hands, and people lost their fucking minds. Doctors ridiculed him and everyone hated him. He had a nervous breakdown, was committed to an insane asylum, beaten by the guards, and died from a gangrenous wound as a result of the beating. Imagine being trolled to death then being proven to be one of the rightest humans who ever lived. My ghost would slowly push the earth into the sun. Wrote an econ paper in 2007 about the housing market crashing and was told the housing market never crashes. Can you write another paper about the housing market crashing next year? Sincerely, a Canadian. The journalists who maintained Lance Armstrong was doping when he was winning the Tour de France. I remember they were mocked because they admittedly went to extremes hunting for evidence. I remember reports of them sifting through Armstrong's trash. Lance Armstrong was a great story, a testicular cancer survivor who beat the disease and went on to set the record for most Tour de France victories. Was it 7 dart? He was untouchable. Anyone contesting he was cheating was shamed. I remember the journalists investigating him were mostly French, so they were dismissed because they were sour that an American was breaking the Tour de France records. I remember other tour winners such as Greg LeMond and Floyd Landis also contesting that Armstrong was cheating, and both being silenced shamed. Landis had tested positive himself for doping, so he wasn't considered a reliable source. I remember with LeMond they dug into his history and brought up child abuse he suffered as a result of him making claims against Armstrong. Turns out they were alright. I remember hearing stories that he was just a genetic freak, a mutant born with unusually large lungs and a heart that made him almost superhuman. It turns out he was just a doper. Patricia Stallings comes to mind. Convicted of poisoning her first child, gave birth in prison, kid got taken away, and the kid also dies. Instead of poisoning, it was now found it was a genetic defect that had similar effects as poisoning with antifreeze. Looks like all replies to your comment are bots copy plus pasting from other top comments. One of the lesser known ones is Helen Keller. Her story of overcoming her disabilities as a young woman was often taught to children, but her adult life was largely excluded because of her radical ideas at the time, which involved pushing for black rights, anti-lynching laws, early support of birth control, supporting liberal socialism, and she even co-founded the American Civil Liberties Union. John Yudkin. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/John_Yudkin_ was a food scientist who tried hard to push the idea that sugar caused heart disease and obesity amongst other conditions. He suggested a low-carb diet for weight loss in 1958. The sugar industry paid scientists like Ansel Keys and D. Mark Hegstad to downplay this connection and suggest that dietary fat caused obesity and heart disease. Massive lobbying helped pro-sugar scientists to become advisors to government and officially suggest a low-fat diet to prevent heart disease. Taking fat out of food makes it taste bad, so what do they add? More sugar, causing the food to be unhealthier. The demonizing of fat lasted well into the 2000s and often still persists to this day. I've had this conversation with people loads of times. There's a documentary out there, unfortunately I don't remember the name, where they actually have footage from the 50s congressional hearings on this exact topic. The conclusion I always state is that if fat had a lobbying group, who knows how things could have been. The McDonald's coffee burn incident. 1. She didn't want it to be a spectacle, she just wanted her medical bills paid. 2. She wanted her medical bills paid because she had third-degree burns on her vagina. Coffee shouldn't be that hot. 3. It was ultimately the lawyers and the jury that determined the payout, she had no say in any of it. Her labia literally fused together from the burns. Alan Turing. It crushes my soul just thinking about how much he changed computer science and computation only to have such a horrible end of life. Without him WW2 would have lasted far longer and cost so many more lives. Rose McGowan for calling out Harvey Weinstein. Adding to this, Courtney Love, who commented on what he was up to years ago. That Roman that gave Jesus vinegar to drink. Many medieval Christian writers saw the offering of vinegar wine as an act of torture rather than mercy. But turns out that the Roman military gave their soldiers a water vinegar mix to drink, so the Roman soldier shared with Jesus some of what he had to drink. Yeah, it was basically Roman Gatorade. Nicholas Copernicus theorized that the planets actually circled the sun instead of the other way around. The church initially accepted heliocentricity but banned his views in 1600s. He will forever be remembered for setting up one of my favorite insults of all time. Copernicus called. It turns out you're not the center of the universe. Jon Snow. He tried to remove the handle of a water pump in London that was drawing its water downstream from a sewage pipe. People who drew water from the pump called cholera. This is a funny answer, because the fictional Jon Snow from GOT is also an example. Vilified and hated for letting the wildlings through the wall, but was right. William H. Seward arranged the purchase of the Alaska Territory from Russia for $7 million. The media and politicians of the era termed it Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox, and President Andrew Johnson's Polar Bear Garden. The half-dozen or so scientists and physicians who waged a decades-long struggle in the 1930s-70s to prove that lead exposure was bad, and dusting everything with lead by burning it in gasoline was bad. The industry opposition was unreal. I know Needleman at least had his work shut down for a few years as his university conducted a thorough investigation for scientific misconduct. Dr. John Leal, the first man to chlorinate drinking water to kill germs. Only, chlorine is a deadly poison, so he did so secretly for a couple months at first. The judge was incredulous that a man would poison the water supply from which his own son drank, but Leal said that it was the safest water in the world, and he was right. Suitably diluted, the chlorine does no notable damage to humans, worlds of hurt to bacteria. Stanislav Petrov. More people need to know his name. He literally, like quite literally, saved the world. Saved the world from nuclear ruin, simply because he was stubborn and refused to believe the computing error. He went against his position orders, and was consequently sacked by the USSR and lived an isolated life. Not necessarily vilified by all, but vilified by the USSR and ignored by the West. Put some respect on his name. And he didn't even win a Nobel Peace Prize. Died in 2017. Recommend watching Stanislav Petrov, the man who saved the world. Yes. Almost no one knows about him. He factually saved the human race and the planet from destruction. Stanislav Petrov is a hero. Richard Jewell, and the Atlanta Olympic bombing. The leave Britney alone guy. Came here to say this. He was mocked by everyone when the video came out, but he was right. Johnny Rotten, John Lydon, talking about Jimmy Savile in 1978. The BBC banged him, Lydon, at the time, I think. And we all know how that panned out. Alan Turing, the British mathematician and computer scientist, was persecuted and prosecuted for his homosexuality, which was considered illegal at the time. Turing's work in breaking the Enigma code during World War II was pivotal in Allied victory. He is now celebrated for his contributions to computing and artificial intelligence.